cut that clip there, then these people are simply shot dead. Men and women, they're shot dead. We can't show you the beheadings, how long they take, the sadism, the joy these Islamists have in hearing these people scream, and the amount of blood and suffering. We can't show you that. We're still waiting. We are still waiting for those demonstrations of outraged Muslims angry at the murder of James Foley. And some Muslims have said to me, you shouldn't ask us to protest. Yes, of course we disagree with this, but why would we have to protest? My response is this: you protest at almost anything.
And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. I'm Rick Unger, filling in the chair for Steve, who's taken a few well-earned days off. As you may have heard by now, England has raised their terror threat level to severe. President Obama spoke yesterday about ISIS and Hamas, a terrorist organization that continues to war with Israel. All of these situations that seem to continue to spiral, go on every day, it's something new. What do all these situations have in common? Unfortunately, what they have in common is radical Muslims. But with tens of millions of peaceful Muslims around the globe, why aren't we hearing more from them in opposition to the radical sect of their religion? Now, this was a question I raised about 2 weeks ago on a radio show I was hosting and got some remarkable responses, so I wanted to dig into it a bit deeper. To do that, I'm joined now by founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, and columnist for the Daily Beast, a great political medium, a former lawyer. He went straight as I did, Dean Obeidallah. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as Dean knows, this did come up for me recently. I was hosting a show, and I brought up the issue and asked the question that we just saw this newscaster up in Canada ask the question: where are the peaceful, overwhelming majority of Muslims around the world, and why aren't they condemning the behavior of a group like ISIS? Now, we know that this did recently happen, and this was one of the reasons that I wanted to have you gentlemen on, to talk about where we're beginning to see this take place. Let's start with Dean. Dean, tell us about what happened in Detroit recently. I should say Dearborn, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit.
Well, specifically, what do you mean, what recently happened in Dearborn? I'm not exactly sure what you mean.
Well, there was this kind of a protest. You had 50 local Muslims showing up to let everybody know that they too condemn the behavior of ISIS.
But the idea that Muslims have just begun to denounce terrorism is just factually inaccurate. It doesn't mean people haven't heard it or it hasn't been in the media. That's a different story. Since 9/11, I've seen Muslims denounce it. But really, after the Boston Marathon bombing a little over a year ago, then Boko Haram, and now with ISIS, I've seen such a concerted effort by Muslim American and Muslim organizations worldwide making a public statement denouncing it. There was just a press conference yesterday in LA. The Muslim Public Affairs Committee did it with law enforcement there together, denouncing ISIS. So you have CARE, you have ISNA, you have Muslim organizations denouncing it, and finally it's seeping into the media. And that's part of the struggle. I mean, and that's why I like being on. Thanks for having me on, Rick. And I know Steve, well, I disagree with Steve Malzberg a lot. It lets me come on and give the other side to make people aware that there are Muslims out there, mainstream Muslims are denouncing terrorism, but not everyone's hearing it, and that's part of the challenge.
Well, Dr. Jasser, Dean does have a point, and I've come to learn this, and with Dean's help largely, that this is not necessarily a question of the community staying silent. It may be a question that the media is not presenting the platform that's required to spread this message. What's your take on it?
I'm sorry, I don't buy that, because the bottom line is that Americans are smart. This is not a problem with just violence. These guys don't become militants who behead people overnight. The organization calls itself the Islamic State, and we need a 12-step program as a Muslim community, and our leadership is in profound denial as to the root causes of these radicalizations.
Which would be what, in your opinion?
As long as the narrative is about violence, we won't get to condemnations that resonate. The problem is political Islam, the Islamic State. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation are 56 countries ruled by governments that implement Sharia in various ways and do draconian activities. And just like Al-Qaeda was produced by the Saudi-type system and ideology, ISIS is produced by the militancy of the region and the ideologies, and Assad's policies were what produced that cancer. And until we deal with the reform necessary to separate mosque and state, and until these organizations, and the reason they're not doing it is I'm sorry, Dean, the organizations you listed are mostly part of the Muslim Brotherhood legacy groups that get their oxygen from political Islam, and they're not going to do it, just like the alcoholic who doesn't want to deal with the violence that happens with alcoholism. They think they can moderate Islamism and have a democratic Islamic state, but the bottom line is, we're learning from ISIS what really happens in Islamic states.
ISIS is slaughtering Muslims daily. I mean, we talk about James Foley because that moved Americans. They are slaughtering Muslims, Shiite, Sunni, they don't care. Islamic, no, barbaric. Yes, that's what ISIS is. Is there a component of religion? Yes, I believe in their mind, a lot of them are moved by religion. Twisted, perverted, whatever you want, that's true. But the idea, I'm focused on America, and the question from Rick was really about American Muslim organizations. Are we denouncing terrorism? Are we not? Are we getting in the media to make our case? That's the question. In America, only about 2% of Americans are Muslims. Most Americans never met a Muslim. A new poll came out 2 weeks ago. 60% of Americans have never met a Muslim. Like, I want to be your Muslim friend. If you're conservative, you're watching on Twitter and Facebook, adopt a Muslim is what I'd like to do. I think, first of all, people got to get to know Muslims so they'll know when we're denouncing it. And then secondly, it's assumed that when someone is radical like ISIS, they don't represent mainstream Islam. Like, I don't assume that a guy who boards up an abortion clinic is mainstream Christianity. Of course I know that's not true because I know so many great Christians and I know what the aberrations are. But what Zuhdi is, I agree with Zuhdi on one thing, it's a deeper issue. That's a different story about how to stop radicalization. I'm not an expert on that.
And Dr. Jasser, I understand that you're speaking to what you view as some of the root causes of the problems. I get it. But what we're really talking about is a bit of a different issue. What we're talking about is what I view as the importance of American Muslims. I can't speak for other countries, but American Muslims letting their fellow countrymen know, and that's what we are. We are all fellow countrymen, letting them know that they are not some tiny little group that supports this kind of awful behavior, that they see it as the rest of us see it, and that they are Americans and are as concerned about American interests and American safety as every other American. And this is where I raise the question, are they doing enough? And if they are doing enough, is the media giving them the necessary platform to let people know that they are?
Well, I think if you judge doing enough as press releases coming out of a fax machine and emails condemning terrorism, or even demonstrations with people walking down the street saying we're not ISIS because of the violence, yeah, I think they've been doing more than would be expected. But again, there is a deeper problem here, and the audience for this problem is not only non-Muslims to try to tell them that Islam is peaceful. The audience is Muslims. Yes, ISIS killed 30 to 40 imams first because they realize there's a deep religious component that is countering them, but that's more Sunni versus Shia Islamism versus the bigger problem, which is the root cause is this supremacy. Why, Dean, why are there more Muslims in Britain going to serve in ISIS than there are serving in the British Army? And the reason is the Islamo-patriotism pulls them more than the patriotism to the West, because there is an ideological conflict about allegiance and loyalty to the Islamic State.
But I gotta say,
Hassan.
You keep going to other countries, which is okay. I'm not disputing or questioning the importance of your point. But I am a little bit more focused on the American Muslim community. And we did see this week that there are 2 people from this country who went to fight with ISIS and lost their lives.
200.
Over 200.
Over 200 have gone to fight with ISIS.
I was saying 2 have lost their lives. Yes,
yeah.
Over a couple of hundred. A bit different than the situation in England. But even those 200 who have become, as far as I'm concerned, our enemy, is not representative of the Muslim community in this country. It's just not. It's a very tiny little number. And to your point that if you think that press releases and the like are enough to get the point across, I would actually argue that it's not enough. I do, however, like to see demonstrations, because even though it was only 50 people in Dearborn, it made the national newspapers. Dean?
I agree. Everything together, like not one event is going to change it. And what happened with me and you on the radio, Rick, because Rick was saying, I don't see, and he meant it well intentioned, I don't see a lot of Muslims denouncing terrorism. Well, the show that Rick was on, I'm on all the time, I guest hosted sometime, and he got tweets from people going, no, Dean's been on, he's talked about it, he's written about it for the Daily Beast, he's talked about other organizations announcing it. To me, it's more about a permanent place in the media for Muslims. Now, there's no affirmative action. I can't expect the media just to go like, sure, you want to be on our TV? That's part of our own internal challenge to understand we have to get in the media. Secondly, to be honest, the media gravitates towards big, dramatic, sensational things. A beheading, killings. You know, if we had, so Dr. Jasser's on Fox News and making a good representation of Islam, he's on for 2 minutes. The rest of the show, of course,
Dean, I got to wrap it up because we're up against a hard break. We could talk about this for hours, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. We've been talking with Dr. M. Zuhdi Jasser, columnist for the Daily Beast. I'm sorry, he's not a columnist. He's from the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. And my friend, Dean Obeidallah, coming up right next, the best of Gimme 5.